A single test result changed everything. This is the story of how I lost my family, survived alone, and built a life they could never touch. The test result. The paper trembled in my hands. Not because of the number on it, but because of what that number represented. Positive. 2 lines. One quiet confirmation that my existence had just fractured into 2 distinct versions, the life before this moment and everything that would follow. I was in the 10th grade, just 16 years old. My world had revolved around exams, attendance percentages, and assignment deadlines. Suddenly, those concerns felt incredibly small compared to the new reality growing silently inside me. I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like an eternity, nearly 20 minutes, just staring at the test, as if intense focus could somehow change the outcome through sheer will. It didn't. Reality, I've learned, never negotiates. The most difficult part wasn't even the pregnancy itself. It was the conversation I knew was coming. My parents were traditional people. They believed in discipline above all else, in a structured life, and in protecting the family's reputation at any cost. Every decision you made, every action you took, every single achievement was a reflection on the family name. Mistakes weren't something you discussed openly. They were something you were judged for, privately and permanently. Still, a part of me, a naive part, believed that honesty was the only path forward. That evening, after we had finished dinner, I gathered every ounce of courage I had and asked if we could talk. My mother sensed the shift in the air immediately. My father, without a word, muted the television. "What happened?" he asked, his voice flat. I didn't speak. I simply placed the test on the table between us. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was recognition. My mother stared at the result, and I watched her expression change in slow, distinct stages. First came the shock, then disbelief, and then something much colder settled over her features. My father didn't even bother to touch the paper. "Is this a joke?" he demanded. "No," I replied. The word felt so small, so inadequate, leaving my mouth. The energy in the room shifted instantly. It didn't get louder, it got sharper, more dangerous. "How could you do this?" my mother whispered. Not "what happened?" Not "are you okay?" Just immediate, searing blame. "I didn't plan this," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. But my explanation was unwelcome. Responsibility had already been assigned, and the verdict was clear. My father stood up slowly, the way he always did when he considered a conversation finished. "You've embarrassed this family." The sentence landed with more weight than any shout ever could. "I'm still your daughter," I said quietly. That was the precise moment everything changed. Because instead of softening, he only hardened further. "No," he replied, his voice cold and final. "Not if you choose this." Choose. As if this terrifying reality was a preference I had casually selected. My mother folded her arms tightly across her chest, a barrier I couldn't penetrate. "You're too young to understand what this will cost us." Us. Not me. Not the baby. Us. I felt something inside me crack. Not a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, permanent fracture. "I need support," I said. My voice somehow remained calm, even though my hands were shaking uncontrollably. My father pointed toward the hallway, toward the door. "You need consequences." Then came the sentence that rewrote the entire script of my life. "If you walk forward with this mistake, you walk forward without this family." Silence consumed the room. It was heavy, absolute, and final. I waited. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. Sometimes parents say extreme things, expecting you to beg, to negotiate emotionally. But no negotiation came. There was only expectation. The silent expectation that I would fix this problem. Quietly. Quickly. Permanently. I understood exactly what they were asking me to do, and I understood, with absolute clarity, what I could not do. So I made the only decision I could live with. "I'm not ending this," I said softly. The words barely left my mouth before my mother turned her back on me. My father didn't hesitate. "Then pack your things." There was no yelling. No dramatic escalation. Just cold, clinical removal. Within 40 minutes, my entire life had been reduced to what I could carry, one backpack and one small suitcase. Clothes. school books, a few personal items. Nothing sentimental, because sentiment no longer had a place in that house. When I reached the front door, I stopped. Not because I expected them to suddenly change their minds, but because a small, stubborn part of me still hoped they would. They didn't. The door opened. The cold night air rushed in, replacing the warmth of a home that no longer felt like mine. "Do not come back," my father said. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I finally fully understood. And then I stepped outside. 16 years old. Pregnant. And officially, completely alone. I didn't cry. Not then. Shock has a way of protecting you from emotion when survival becomes the only immediate priority. I just walked down the street, without any destination in mind, only a direction: forward. Behind me, I heard the click of the porch lights switching off. That small, mundane detail hurt more than anything else. It meant they weren't waiting. They were done. What I didn't know, standing there in the dark, was that years later, those same people would search for me again. Not for forgiveness. Not for reconciliation. But for someone they believed existed, my son. There was only one problem. He didn't. The life I built without them. The first few months were not inspiring. They were raw survival. I stayed with a school friend for 2 weeks, until her parents gently, apologetically explained that they couldn't keep me any longer. After that, a local women's support center became my lifeline. They helped me find temporary housing and, more importantly, helped me find a way to continue my schooling. There were endless forms to fill out, appointments to keep, quiet rooms where strangers spoke to me with unexpected gentleness, because they already understood a pain that my own family had refused to acknowledge. Every single day felt uncertain, but the structure kept me moving forward. I studied harder than I ever had in my life. Not to prove anyone wrong. Just to keep my future from collapsing entirely. The pregnancy, however, didn't follow the same steady, manageable path. The constant stress, the exhaustion, the relentless instability, they took their toll. During my 5th month, after a sudden and severe complication, everything changed in a single, devastating hospital visit. There are moments in life where the world doesn't crash down around you with a loud noise. It simply empties. The doctor spoke carefully, using a soft tone and measured words, but the meaning was unmistakably clear. The baby hadn't survived. I remember nodding, even thanking her as if politeness could somehow hold my crumbling pieces together. Later that night, sitting alone in the sterile hospital room, I realized something strange. I wasn't only grieving the child I had lost. I was grieving the version of myself who had once believed that pain automatically brings people back together. My parents never called. Not during the pregnancy. Not after the loss. The silence they had chosen on that first night had become a permanent wall between us. So I moved forward again. This time, it was different. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was actively building. I finished school through evening classes while working part-time at a small accounting office. I found comfort in numbers. They were predictable. They were balanced. They were logical, everything my personal life had never been. One small opportunity led to another. A certification. Then a full-time role. Then, finally, stability. By 24, I had my own apartment. By 26, I was managing a small financial team. Order replaced chaos. Routine replaced uncertainty. And slowly, gradually, the past stopped feeling like an open, bleeding wound. It became a closed chapter. A part of my history, but no longer the definition of my present. Until one afternoon, nearly 9 years after I had walked out of that house, my phone rang. The number was unknown. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Hello," I answered. The voice on the other end was hesitant, older, but still painfully familiar. Is this my daughter?" My heart didn't race. It didn't soften. It simply steadied, because in that instant, I already understood something they didn't. They weren't calling for me. They were calling for the grandson they believed I had been raising all these years. When we finally met, they spoke nervously, awkwardly, about their grandson. What did he like? How old was he now? Could they please see him? I listened quietly, letting their questions hang in the air. Then I said, calmly and clearly, there is no grandson. Silence fell instantly, heavier than before. I explained everything. The loss. The hospital room. The years of silence during which they had never once picked up the phone. I watched their faces change. Not with shock, but with a dawning, terrible realization. Time doesn't just pass. It reveals what truly mattered all along. I had once thought that being left alone was the end of my story, but it became the beginning of my strength. Loss taught me resilience. Silence taught me clarity. Some people only return when it becomes convenient for them. But I have learned that real family is defined by who stays when life is at its hardest. Respect, like trust, arrives far too late when it isn't protected from the very beginning. They hadn't lost a grandson. They had lost a daughter first. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life narratives. Thank you for listening.